Welcome to Life Stories, where we share real-life experiences that touch the heart and inspire change. Today's story is about Emily Carter, a girl who thought she had the perfect family, until tragedy struck and everything she knew was taken from her. Abandoned by her own mother, betrayed by those she trusted, and forced to start over. Emily's journey is one of resilience, love, and finding true family in the most unexpected way. Stay with us to hear her incredible story. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. My name is Emily Carter, and for the first 11 years of my life, I believed I had the perfect family. We weren't rich at first, but we were happy, just me, Mom, and Dad living in our cozy little home in Oak Ridge. A quiet town where everyone knew their neighbors. Life felt simple, filled with the kind of warmth that made you think nothing could ever go wrong. My father, William Carter, was the hardest working man I've ever known. He built his transportation company from the ground up, starting with just 2 old trucks and a dream. In the early days, he did everything himself, driving, managing paperwork, even repairing the trucks when they broke down. I remember the nights he'd come home late, his hands covered in grease. Yet he'd still smile when he saw me waiting by the door. Mom, Lisa, worked as a restaurant manager. Back then, she was good at what she did, though she constantly complained about the long hours. One day, William, she'd say at dinner, stirring her food without eating much, "I just want to be a proper housewife. All these late nights are killing me." Dad would only smile, pat her hand, and promise, "Soon, sweetheart, you'll be able to stay home and live the life you want." And true to his word, when I was 9, everything changed. Dad landed several big contracts that transformed his small business into a thriving company. Suddenly, our modest home was no longer enough. We moved into a beautiful 2-story house in the nicest neighborhood in town. I remember stepping into my new bedroom for the first time. Awestruck. It was huge, with a window that overlooked the backyard, pale purple walls, and fairy lights strung across the ceiling like tiny stars. The best part was the massive bookshelf Dad built himself, spending an entire weekend on it. I can still hear his voice muttering under his breath whenever a screw didn't fit, followed by his proud grin when he finally got it right. With Dad's success, Mom finally quit her job. But instead of the warm, loving mother I had imagined she'd be, she was hardly ever home. There were always lunches with friends, shopping trips, salon appointments. At first, I didn't mind. I had Dad, and no matter how busy he got, he always made time for me. Every Sunday, we had our little ritual, an ice cream outing where he'd listen to me talk about school, friends, and the latest books I was obsessed with, as if my words were the most important thing in the world. The last time we had ice cream together was just before I turned 11. It was a bright spring day, and we sat on our usual bench near the park. One of my drivers called in sick. Dad told me, finishing his cone, "Guess I'll have to do the run myself tomorrow. Just like the old days. Can I come with you?" I asked, hopeful for an adventure. He chuckled, ruffling my hair. "Not this time, princess. Just a quick overnight trip. I'll be back before you know it." That evening, as I hugged him goodnight, something made me hold on a little longer. "Love you, Dad," I whispered. "Love you more, kiddo," he replied. The next morning, he left before dawn. Mom was still asleep, so Maria, our nanny, made his coffee and packed his lunch. I didn't see him go, but I heard the sound of his truck pulling out of the driveway. That was the last time I ever saw my father alive. The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. I know because I was awake, lying in bed with a strange feeling in my stomach. Then, I heard Mom scream. A crash followed, the sound of glass shattering. My heart pounded as I slipped out of bed, my small feet cold against the wooden floor. The next few hours were a blur. Police officers filled our living room, their voices low and serious. Maria held me close while Mom paced back and forth, phone pressed to her ear, her face twisted in panic. Words like collision, died instantly, and jackknifed truck floated around me like dark butterflies. But none of them made sense. I understood only one thing: Dad was gone. At the funeral, I stared at the closed casket, unable to accept that my father was inside. Mom put on quite a show, wailing loudly, collapsing against the casket as if grief had stolen the strength from her body. At 11, I thought that was just how adults handled loss. But looking back, I see it differently. It was at the funeral that I met Uncle David and Aunt Catherine for the first time. David looked so much like Dad that it made my heart ache. He knelt down to my level, his eyes full of sorrow. "Emily," he said softly, "I'm your father's brother. I'm so sorry we're meeting like this." I frowned. Why haven't I met you before? His face darkened, sadness flickering in his gaze. "Your father and we had a disagreement a long time ago. But that doesn't matter now. I had to come say goodbye to my little brother." For a brief moment, I found comfort in his presence. I clung to the idea that someone who loved my father as much as I did was still here. But even then, I had no idea how much my life was about to change, or how quickly my mother's grief would disappear, replaced by something far colder. In the weeks following Dad's funeral, our house felt eerily quiet. The absence of his voice, his laughter, the scent of motor oil lingering on his jacket, it all made the space feel empty. Like a home without its foundation. I had expected Mom to be devastated for a long time. But her grief seemed to vanish faster than I could understand. At first, she pretended to care. She spent a few days locked in her room, emerging only with red-rimmed eyes and a shaky voice. But soon, she stopped talking about Dad altogether. Instead of mourning, she started making phone calls, long, hushed conversations that ended in tight smiles. Then came the meetings. Business meetings, she called them. "I have to keep your father's company afloat," she said one evening, tossing a pile of papers onto the dining table. "You wouldn't understand, Emily, but I need to take control now." I didn't understand, but I knew something was wrong. Dad had built his company carefully, like a house made of bricks, laying each foundation with precision and pride. Yet, within weeks of taking over, Mom was already talking about restructuring and modernization, big words that seemed empty when coming from someone who had never stepped foot in a truck yard. Maria, our nanny, saw it too. She watched Mom come home late, smelling of expensive perfume, carrying shopping bags from high-end boutiques. "Your mother spends money like water," Maria muttered one afternoon as she prepared my lunch. "Those poor drivers haven't been paid properly in weeks." She was right. Slowly, Dad's company began falling apart. The people who had worked for him for years, men and women I had known since I was little, who used to bring me small gifts from their roots, started quitting one by one. They couldn't survive on promises. Mom acted like she didn't care. Then, 6 months after Dad's death, the final blow came. Mom sold the company. I still remember the way she walked through the front door that evening, her heels clicking against the floor, a satisfied smile on her lips. "It's done," she announced. "I made the best decision for all of us." She had sold Dad's life's work for a fraction of what it was worth. I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell her she had destroyed everything he built. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I spent more time at the library after school, lingering between the shelves until the sky turned dark. It was better than going home to an empty house. Maria was my only source of comfort, the only person who still seemed to care about me. She even started teaching me Spanish, saying it would come in handy one day. But even that small comfort didn't last. One night, Mom came home later than usual, giggling like a teenager. I was in the kitchen, finishing my homework, when she burst through the door with a stranger beside her, a tall man in an expensive suit with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Emily, sweetheart," Mom cooed, her voice thick with fake enthusiasm. "Come meet Mark." I stared at him, confusion knotting in my stomach. "Who's Mark?" Mom clutched his arm like he was some kind of lifeline. "Mark and I got married last weekend. He's your new father now." My whole body went cold. I could barely process the words. "Married? Last weekend?" I gritted my teeth. "I already have a father." Mark's smile faltered. He narrowed his eyes at me. "Listen here, young lady," he said, his voice suddenly stern. "Your mother and I are married now. You need to accept that and show some respect." I glared at him. "You're not my father. You'll never be my father." Mom gasped. turning to Mark with an exaggerated look of distress. See what I mean? She's difficult. But I'm sure we can fix that. Fix that? Like I was a problem. Something broken that needed adjusting. I didn't know it yet. But Mark moving in was just the beginning. Within a week, his entire family, his mother, Gloria, his sister, Janet, and his 12-year-old niece, Olivia, had moved in too. It was like an invasion. Our home transformed overnight. They took over everything. Mom and Dad's old furniture was replaced. Their wedding photos taken down. Every trace of our past erased. Mom didn't seem to mind. She and Janet became best friends. Shopping together, whispering in corners like teenage girls. Gloria took over the kitchen, constantly complaining about Maria's cooking, until one day, she finally got her way. Maria was fired. She packed her things quietly. But when she hugged me goodbye, I saw the sadness in her eyes. Take care of yourself, Nina, she whispered. No matter what happens, remember, you are worth more than this. I wanted to beg her to stay, to not leave me alone with them. But I was 12, and in my mother's house. My voice no longer mattered. The changes in the house weren't subtle. They were swift and deliberate. As if Mark's family had been waiting for this moment. The home my father had built, the one filled with love and memories, no longer felt like mine. I avoided them as much as I could. I stayed out late at the library, pretending to be immersed in books when, in reality, I just didn't want to go home. But no matter how much I tried to disappear, the house, their house now, always found a way to remind me that I didn't belong. Then, one day, I came home from school and froze in the doorway of my bedroom. Olivia was inside. My Olivia, my room. She stood in the middle of it, surveying the space like a queen inspecting her new palace. My books were thrown haphazardly onto the floor. My fairy lights torn down. My bed covered in her pink and gold bedspread. The bookshelf my father had built, the one he had spent a weekend working on with his own hands, was empty. My things piled in boxes against the wall. I felt something sharp and electric twist in my stomach. What are you doing in my room? Olivia turned to me with a smirk. Aunt Lisa said I could have it. She said simply, as if she were discussing the weather. It's bigger than the guest room. I need more space for my things. My breath came in quick. Shallow bursts. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. She tilted her head. No, it's mine now. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I lunged at her, my hands reaching for her shoulders. Shoving her back, she let out a screech, grabbing at my arms, her nails scratching my skin as we fell to the floor in a tangled mess of limbs. Get out, I screamed. This is my room. You can't have it. The noise must have carried through the house because, within seconds, Mom and Mark stormed in. Emily. Mom's voice was shrill, her face twisted in anger. How dare you? I struggled against Mark's grip as he yanked me away from Olivia. She stole my room, I shouted. Dad gave it to me. She threw my things on the floor. Mark's fingers tightened around my arm. His face, usually painted with fake charm, darkened with something cruel. Your father is dead, he snarled. This is my house now. And you'll do as you're told. I barely had time to register the words before Mom stepped forward. Her voice cold and final. You're moving to the small room down the hall. And if I ever catch you laying a hand on Olivia again, you'll regret it. I stood there, stunned, as Olivia wiped fake tears from her eyes and smirked at me behind Mom's back. I had lost. That night, they locked me in the small guest room, the one without windows. The one that smelled like old furniture and dust. My books, my decorations, everything that had made my space mine was gone. The bookshelf Dad built, thrown out like garbage. I spent 2 days in there. They let me out only for school and bathroom breaks. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Olivia play music in my old room. Downstairs, I could hear Mom and Janet laughing over glasses of wine. Their voices carefree, like nothing had changed, but everything had. The last remnants of my old life had been taken from me. And worst of all, the person who was supposed to love me most, the person who had once been my mother, didn't even care. Years have passed since the day I walked out of that house. Never looking back, I still remember the cold detachment in my mother's eyes when she handed me over to Uncle David and Aunt Catherine as if I were an old piece of furniture she no longer wanted. At the time, it shattered me, but now, standing where I am today, I see it as the greatest blessing of my life. My real parents, the ones who chose me, gave me the love and stability I never knew I needed. They guided me through school, celebrated my successes, and picked me up when I stumbled. Because of them, I excelled in my studies, earned a scholarship, and built a life that I could have never imagined in that lonely guest room all those years ago. Today, I am happy. I have a career I love, a husband who adores me, and parents who have never once made me feel like a burden. When people ask about my real family, I tell them the truth. Family isn't about blood, it's about love. About the people who stand by you when the rest of the world walks away. As for Lisa and her new family, I don't know where they are now. And honestly, I don't care. She lost the right to be my mother the moment she chose convenience over love. And me? I found my real home. Thank you for watching my story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more incredible journeys of resilience, hope, and second chances.